The wooden doll looked innocent enough, just another carved toy from the crazy old prisoner in Block 7. But inside its hollow chest was hidden the most sophisticated piece of technology the Nazis had never seen. And tonight, it was going to help 200 prisoners escape. The morning of September 15, 1943, began like any other at Stalag Luft 3. The German guards conducted their routine roll call, counted their prisoners, and settled into another day of managing what they believed to be broken men. But in Block 7, something extraordinary was taking shape, carved one wooden shaving at a time. Colonel William Harrison sat hunched over his small wooden table, his weathered hands working methodically with a dull table knife. At 58, he looked every bit the defeated old man the Germans expected him to be. His Royal Air Force uniform hung loose on his diminished frame. His once sharp blue eyes now seemed clouded with resignation, and his silver hair had grown long and unkempt during his 8 months in captivity. The guards had stopped paying attention to him weeks ago. To them, he was der alte Narr, the old fool, a broken engineer who had retreated into his childhood, spending his days carving wooden toys like a senile grandfather, whittling away his final years. Wieder Spielzeug, Opa? Feldwebel Miller taunted as he conducted his morning inspection, pointing at the small wooden doll taking shape in Harrison's hands. More toys, Grandpa. The other guards chuckled. It had become a running joke among them, the crazy old Englishman who made children's playthings. Harrison looked up slowly, his eyes focusing with effort, as if emerging from a fog. Ja, ja, he mumbled in heavily accented German. It helps me remember better times. His voice carried the hollow quality of a man whose spirit had been thoroughly crushed. But behind those clouded eyes, one of Britain's most brilliant aeronautical engineers was executing the most sophisticated deception of his career. Colonel Harrison had not broken. He had simply become invisible. The transformation had been deliberate and gradual. When he first arrived at Stalag Luft 3 in January 1943, shot down during a bombing raid over Hamburg, Harrison had been defiant. He had refused to answer questions beyond name, rank, and serial number. He had organized work slowdowns and encouraged fellow prisoners to resist. The Germans had tried everything to break him. Solitary confinement in a concrete box barely large enough to lie down. Interrogations that lasted for hours under blinding lights. Reduced rations until he could barely stand. But Harrison's spirit had remained unbroken, and his defiance had made him a target. Then, in March, everything changed. During a particularly brutal interrogation session, Oberst Klaus Richter, the camp commandant, had made a crucial mistake. He had bragged about the camp's security systems, detailing the radio detection equipment, the guard rotations, the electronic sensors that made escape absolutely impossible. "You see, Herr Colonel," Richter had said with smug satisfaction, "this is not some primitive camp from the last war. This is a modern facility. We have radio detection equipment that can pick up transmission signals from kilometers away. We have motion sensors around the perimeter. We have guards with training in psychological warfare. Your fellow prisoners may attempt their little tunnels and their crude escape plans, but they will fail. They always fail." It was then that Harrison realized the truth. The German strength was also their weakness. They were so confident in their technology, so certain of their superiority, that they had become blind to simpler possibilities. That night, lying on his thin mattress in his concrete cell, Harrison began to plan. Not an escape. That would come later. First, he needed to disappear, not physically, but psychologically, he needed to become someone the Germans would ignore completely. The transformation began slowly. Harrison started acting confused during interrogations, forgetting simple details, repeating himself. He began talking to himself during meals, muttering about his childhood in Yorkshire. He started carving, first just scratching patterns in the wood with a nail he had loosened from his cot, then asking for a proper knife to keep my old hands busy. The guards, trained to watch for signs of escape planning and resistance activities, were completely unprepared for what appeared to be the gradual mental deterioration of an elderly prisoner. Within weeks, Harrison had become exactly what they expected: a broken old man slowly losing his grip on reality. But in his small cell, working by candlelight during the long German nights, Harrison was building something that would change everything. The first challenge had been obtaining materials. Modern radios required components that simply didn't exist in a prison camp. Or so it seemed. Harrison's engineering background had taught him that radio transmission was fundamentally about manipulating electrical fields and frequencies. The specific components mattered less than the principles. A capacitor could be made from any two conductive surfaces separated by an insulator. A coil could be wound from any wire. A crystal detector could be fashioned from a piece of metal and a mineral. The camp's electrical system became his parts store. During his assigned work details in the camp workshops, Harrison carefully pilfered small pieces of wire, screws, and metal fragments. The kitchen provided him with aluminum foil from food packages. His own eyeglasses became a source of thin wire, and even a crude lens for focusing signals. Most ingeniously, he realized that the camp's own infrastructure could serve as his antenna system. The metal bed frames, connected through the building's electrical ground system, created a vast network of conductive pathways that could carry radio signals throughout the entire facility. But having the technical knowledge and materials was only half the challenge. The other half was hiding what he was building. This is where Harrison's toys became crucial. Each wooden figure he carved was actually a carefully designed container for radio components. The innocent-looking doll that Feldwebel Miller mocked contained a complete radio transmitter, its wooden body hollowed out with surgical precision to house coils, capacitors, and a crystal oscillator. The toy soldier that sat on his windowsill was actually a receiver, its wooden rifle barrel serving as an antenna. But Harrison's masterstroke went far beyond individual radios. He was building a network. Every few weeks, Harrison would give away one of his toys to a fellow prisoner. The guards saw this as the harmless generosity of a senile old man sharing his childish creations. In reality, Harrison was distributing communication devices throughout the camp. The wooden horse he gave to squadron leader James Morton in Block 3 contained a transceiver capable of reaching the tunneling operation Morton was secretly leading. The carved airplane he presented to Flight Lieutenant David Chen in Block 12 housed a receiver that could pick up coded messages from the other devices. Within 4 months, Harrison had created an invisible communication network that spanned the entire camp. Prisoners could coordinate activities, share intelligence, and plan operations without ever meeting face to face. But the Germans remained completely oblivious. When they conducted their random searches, they found exactly what they expected: a collection of crude wooden toys made by a mentally deteriorating old man. The primitive carving style that Harrison had deliberately adopted made the figures look like the work of someone whose fine motor skills were failing. No one suspected that each toy was a precisely engineered piece of technology. The breakthrough came in July, when Harrison's network intercepted a coded transmission from London. Using his carefully constructed receivers, he had managed to make contact with British intelligence. For the first time in 6 months, the outside world learned the true conditions inside Stalag Luft 3 and received detailed intelligence about German security procedures. More importantly, Harrison received information that changed everything. A massive Allied bombing campaign was planned for late September. If the prisoners could coordinate a large-scale escape during the chaos of the air raids, they would have their best chance of reaching Allied lines. Harrison knew this was the moment he had been preparing for. But a successful mass escape would require coordination on a scale never before attempted in a prison camp. Hundreds of prisoners would need to move simultaneously, following different routes, with split-second timing. Traditional escape methods, passed notes, whispered conversations, coded tapping on walls, would be too slow and too risky for such a complex operation. But Harrison's toy network could handle it. Through August and early September, Harrison refined his system. He created what he called the Master Controller, a wooden toy soldier that could send coordinated signals to all the other devices in the network. He established communication protocols, backup frequencies, and emergency procedures. The prisoners, initially skeptical about the crazy old man's toys, gradually came to understand that Harrison had built something revolutionary. Squadron leader Morton, who had been digging tunnels for months, realized that Harrison's communication system could coordinate multiple escape routes simultaneously. Flight Lieutenant Chen, who had been forging identity papers, understood that the network could distribute documents and intelligence instantaneously. But perhaps most importantly, the prisoners began to see Harrison himself differently. The defeated old man was revealed to be one of the most ingenious strategic minds any of them had ever encountered. He had turned the Germans' own contempt against them, using their expectations to make himself invisible while building the very weapon that would defeat them. The final test of Harrison's system came on the night of September 20th. Using coded signals transmitted through his toy network, Harrison coordinated a small test escape, just 5 prisoners attempting to breach the perimeter at a weak point in the fence line. The operation was flawless. The 5 men made it safely through the perimeter and were picked up by Allied forces 2 days later. More importantly, the Germans never understood how the escape had been coordinated. They found no notes, no evidence of meetings, no traditional signs of escape planning. Oberst Richter was furious. His supposedly impregnable camp had been breached, and he had no idea how. He ordered increased patrols, more frequent searches, and enhanced surveillance. But he was looking for the wrong things. His guards searched for tunnels, hidden messages, and secret meetings. They never thought to examine the collection of crude wooden toys that various prisoners kept as harmless mementos. By September 25th, Harrison was ready for the main event. Intelligence from London confirmed that the massive bombing raid would begin at 11:30 p.m. on September 28th. The chaos and confusion would provide perfect cover for the largest prison break in history. Harrison's plan was audacious in its scope. Rather than a single escape route, he would coordinate 7 different operations simultaneously. Morton's tunnel team would go first, using their carefully dug passages to get the largest group of prisoners beyond the perimeter. Chen's forgers would distribute false identity papers to prisoners escaping through the main gate during the confusion. A third group would cut through the fence at multiple points, while the guards were responding to air raid procedures. Each operation would be coordinated through Harrison's toy network, with precise timing and real-time communication between the teams. But Harrison faced a personal dilemma. At 58, with his health deteriorated by months of imprisonment, he knew he would slow down any escape group he joined. Worse, his specialized knowledge of the communication system made him too valuable to risk in an escape attempt that might fail. He made the hardest decision of his military career. He would stay behind. On the night of September 28th, as Allied bombers filled the sky above Stalag Luft III, Harrison sat in his cell with the master controller, his wooden toy soldier, in his hands. At exactly 11:30 p.m., he pressed the hidden button. Throughout the camp, 20 wooden toys suddenly came alive. Tiny lights blinked in the darkness. Barely audible signals crackled through the air. The most sophisticated communication system ever deployed in a prison camp began its final operation. Block 3, tunnel teams ready? Ready? First group moving in 30 seconds? Block 7, perimeter teams ready? Fence cutting teams in position? Block 12, document teams ready? Papers distributed? Gate guards drugged. All teams, this is Ghost Base. Operation Wooden Horse is a go. Execute, execute, execute. What followed was a masterpiece of military coordination. As German guards rushed to air raid stations and searchlights swept the sky looking for Allied bombers, 200 prisoners moved through the camp like phantoms. Morton's tunnel teams disappeared into their carefully prepared passages, emerging beyond the perimeter fences in groups of 15. Chen's document teams walked boldly through the main gate, their forged papers passing quick inspections from guards focused on the air raid. The fence-cutting teams sliced through the wire at 7 different points, creating escape routes that wouldn't be discovered until morning. All of it coordinated through Harrison's toy network. Prisoners miles apart could communicate instantly. Team leaders could adjust their timing based on real-time intelligence. When one route became compromised, alternative paths were activated immediately. By dawn, 200 men had vanished from Stalag Luft III. When Oberst Richter discovered the magnitude of the escape, he was beyond furious. He was terrified. This wasn't just a security breach. It was a complete intelligence failure. How had 200 prisoners coordinated such a complex operation without leaving any evidence? The investigation that followed was intensive and brutal. Every prisoner who remained was interrogated. Every cell was searched multiple times. Every piece of communication equipment was examined, but they found nothing. No radio transmitters, no hidden messages, no secret meeting places. Harrison, sitting calmly in his cell, carving another wooden doll, seemed exactly like what he had always appeared to be, a harmless old man who had lost his mind and retreated into childhood fantasies. The investigators found his collection of wooden toys charming in a pathetic way. Here was clear evidence of a man whose intellect had deteriorated to the point where he spent his days making children's playthings. They actually felt sorry for him. What they didn't realize was that those pathetic toys had just executed the most sophisticated military communication operation in prison camp history. Of the 200 men who escaped that night, 127 reached Allied lines successfully. It was the largest successful mass escape from a German prison camp during World War II. The intelligence they brought back provided crucial information for Allied bombing campaigns and resistance operations. But perhaps more importantly, the escape sent shockwaves through the German prison system. If 200 men could vanish from their most secure facility without leaving any trace of how they had coordinated their efforts, then no German installation was truly secure. Harrison himself remained in Stalag Luft III until the camp was liberated by Allied forces in April 1945. During those final months, he continued his act, maintaining the persona of the harmless old toymaker. The guards never suspected that the man they pitied was actually one of the most dangerous prisoners they had ever held. After the war, Harrison's story remained classified for decades. The military value of his techniques was too great to reveal publicly, but among the prisoners he had helped escape, he became a legend. Years later, when military historians finally learned the truth about Operation Wooden Horse, they marveled at Harrison's achievement. Using nothing but scrap materials and extraordinary ingenuity, he had built a communication system that surpassed anything the German military had ever seen. But the technical brilliance was only part of the story. Harrison's greatest weapon hadn't been his engineering skills. It had been his understanding of human psychology. By convincing his captors that he was exactly what they expected a broken old man to be, he had achieved something more valuable than invisibility. He had achieved their contempt. And in that contempt, he had found the ultimate camouflage for one of the most audacious military operations of World War II. The wooden toys that had once sat innocently on prisoners' shelves were eventually destroyed or lost in the chaos of the war's end. But their legacy lived on in the 127 men who had returned home to their families, and in the proof that sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength or weapons, but from making your enemies believe you are exactly what they want you to be. In his post-war memoirs, Squadron Leader Morton wrote, "We thought Harrison had been broken by his captivity. We were right. He had been broken. But he had been broken into exactly the shape he needed to be to save us all. The old man who carved children's toys had given 200 men the greatest gift possible, their freedom. And he had done it one wooden shaving at a time.